What if the only meal a child would eat came not from a five-star kitchen, but from the hands of a struggling single dad in a quiet roadside diner? What if a woman who had everything, wealth, power, success, discovered the one thing she didn't have was the warmth of a slow-cooked bowl of soup? And the man who made it? This is not just a story about food. It's a story about presence, about the small acts of kindness that rebuild broken trust, and about how love sometimes arrives not with diamonds, but with grilled cheese and banana pudding. Before we begin, if you love stories that heal the heart and warm the soul, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Each story is a quiet reminder that kindness still matters, and that even the simplest lives can hold the deepest truths. Now settle in, because this one might just change the way you look at love forever. A struggling single dad cooks for a CEO's picky daughter. Her mother immediately asked to marry him. The storm rolled in without warning. One minute, the sky above the little town of Brookhaven was a dull gray. The next, thunder cracked through the air like a broken bone, and rain came down in heavy sheets, drumming against rooftops, blurring the already forgotten outlines of the main road. Inside a small wooden building at the edge of town, Tom Brennan stirred a pot of soup with quiet precision. The windows of his modest roadside diner were fogged up with steam, the scent of chicken broth, thyme, and slow-simmered carrots warming the air like an old memory. The sign out front had lost its paint in spots, and the door creaked when it opened, but regulars swore there wasn't a more comforting place in the county. Tom wiped his hands on a dish towel, then reached for a loaf of day-old sourdough. He was a man in his mid-30s, lean and sun-worn, with calloused hands that looked like they'd spent equal time under hoods of broken-down trucks and hovering over cast-iron pans. His hair was unkempt, a streak of gray just beginning at his temples. There was a tiredness to him, but it wasn't the kind that made a man weary. It was lived in, the kind that spoke of love carried too long and grief learned too young. He was just about to slice the bread when the bell above the front door jingled, a weak, tentative sound against the roar of the rain. He looked up. A woman stepped in first, wrapped in a navy trench coat, heels soaked through, hair pulled into a low bun that had long since given up trying to stay neat. She was striking, tall, composed, but there was something brittle in the way her eyes scanned the room. Behind her came a little girl, no more than 8, clutching a worn stuffed fox, and looking as though she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "I'm sorry," the woman said, shaking out her umbrella by the door. "Our car broke down just outside town. The tow truck's going to be a while. Would you mind if we waited here?" Tom nodded. "Of course. Storm like this, you're lucky to have made it this far." She offered a polite smile but said nothing more. The girl hovered behind her mother like a shadow. "There's soup on the stove, and grilled cheese if you're hungry," Tom added gently, eyeing the girl. "Might help warm you both up." The woman hesitated, her eyes flicking down to her daughter. "What do you think, sweetheart?" The girl didn't respond. Tom turned back toward the kitchen without pushing further. He'd seen this before. Kids who'd learned to armor themselves young. Sometimes it wasn't what they were given that hurt. It was what they weren't. He ladled out a bowl of chicken soup, added 2 pieces of grilled cheese to a plate, then placed it all on a tray with practiced grace. Nothing fancy, just simple food, made slow and with care. He carried it out and set it on the table near the window. The mother helped her daughter out of her coat and guided her into the booth. The girl eyed the food like it might bite her. Then quietly she dipped her spoon into the soup. Tom turned back to the counter, giving them privacy, pretending to check the timer on a pot that didn't need checking. Rain tapped against the window in rhythm with the ticking of the clock on the far wall. The warmth of the room hummed around them. And then, a sound, barely audible, but it cracked something open inside the silence. The little girl, still clutching her spoon, whispered, "It smells like Mommy when she used to hold me." The woman froze. Tom heard it, though he pretended he hadn't. But the words landed on him like a stone in still water, sending ripples through his chest. He didn't know the story, didn't need to. He'd seen enough to understand that food, real food, not plated perfection, was sometimes the only thing that could cross the space between a child and the world again. The woman reached out and tucked a strand of damp hair behind her daughter's ear. "I'm glad," she murmured. Her voice cracked a little. They ate quietly. The girl, to her mother's visible astonishment, finished the soup, then the sandwich, and even accepted a second slice. Tom brought out 2 mugs of hot chocolate without being asked, one with a marshmallow, one without. The girl smiled for the first time, and something inside Tom's chest shifted. When they were done, the woman stood and approached the counter where Tom stood wiping down a tray. Up close, she looked tired in a different way, like someone who spent too much time being composed for everyone else. "That's soup," she began. "I don't know what you put in it, but it's the first thing she's eaten without protest in months. We've tried every restaurant in the city, private chefs, nutritionists. Nothing worked." Tom gave a one-shouldered shrug. "Just chicken and bones, and a little time." She looked at him. "No," she said softly. "It's not that. There's something else." He didn't reply, just offered a modest smile and turned back to rinse a dish. "I'm Claire," she said after a pause. "This is my daughter, Lily." "Tom," he answered. "That's Max over there." He nodded toward the back booth, where a 10-year-old boy sat with a dog-eared book and a plate of fries. Claire looked at him differently then. Not as a server, not as a stranger, but as someone who had given something to her daughter that she hadn't been able to find anywhere else. Comfort. The tow truck arrived not long after. Claire gathered her things, thanked Tom again, and ushered Lily out into the now drizzling street. Tom stood at the window and watched them go, the warmth of the room still lingering like a heartbeat. He didn't know their last name, didn't know where they were headed, but somehow he had a feeling they'd be back, and if they did come back, he'd have the soup waiting. It had been 4 days since the rainstorm, and Tom had nearly convinced himself they wouldn't return. Storms blow people in and out of town all the time. Strangers with stories, soaked shoes, broken plans. Some you remember for a while, others are gone before the dishes are dry. But then, just before noon on a clear Thursday morning, the bell above the diner door chimed again. Tom looked up, dish towel still in hand. Claire walked in wearing a navy sweater and jeans, more casual than before. She wasn't the sharp-edged executive from the rainstorm. She looked softer somehow, less guarded. Lily followed close behind, clutching her stuffed fox and wearing a bright yellow jacket with one button missing. Tom offered a nod. "Back for the soup?" Claire smiled faintly. "It was requested." Tom glanced down at Lily, who didn't speak but gave a small nod. That alone was more than he expected. He gestured to the same booth they'd taken last time. "Take your seat. It's on the stove already." As Claire and Lily settled in, Tom turned to the kitchen, his hands moving with quiet rhythm. Ladle, bowl, plate, sandwich press. It was strange how natural it felt, like they'd been part of the diner forever. And yet, he didn't even know their last name. He brought the food out moments later, setting the tray down in front of Lily first. This time, her eyes didn't hesitate. She picked up the spoon and dipped it into the steaming bowl without a word. Claire watched her daughter eat, her fingers loosely wrapped around a mug of tea. She glanced up at Tom, almost shyly. "She doesn't eat like this anywhere else," she said softly. Tom pulled out the chair across from them, but didn't sit. Maybe she just needed a break from fancy menus. Claire chuckled, the sound like a melody she hadn't played in a while. "You're not wrong. You'd think access to the best food in the city would count for something. But Lily," she paused, lowering her voice, "ever since the divorce, it's been hard. Not just eating, everything." Tom nodded. He didn't ask for more. He didn't need to. Claire looked at him, her gaze searching. "Do you have a background in food? I mean, beyond this?" Her tone wasn't condescending, just curious. "I studied at the Culinary Institute in New York," he said. "Didn't finish." Claire blinked. "Really? That's one of the best in the country." "Yeah, my wife got sick halfway through my second year. Cancer. I left to take care of her." Her expression changed instantly, softening in a way that made Tom shift his weight uncomfortably. He hadn't meant to say so much. "I'm sorry," she said gently. Tom shrugged. "It was a long time ago. After she passed, I moved here with Max. Opened this place so I could be around for him. That's really all there is to it." Claire nodded slowly, her eyes drifting to the counter where Max sat doing homework between bites of grilled cheese. He seems like a good kid. He is. His mother would have been proud. There was a moment of quiet, the only sound the soft clink of Lily's spoon against the bowl. And then softly, Lily looked up and spoke. To Tom. Do you make this every day? He turned, surprised. Just about. Want to learn how? She blinked, then gave the smallest of smiles. Maybe. Claire's jaw nearly dropped. She stared at her daughter as if she'd spoken in fluent Spanish. Tom pretended not to notice the mother's shock. Well, he said, next time you come in, you can help me stir the pot. But you'll need a proper apron. House rules. Lily smiled again, this time wider. Claire put a hand to her heart. It was more than just relief. It was something like awe. Tom went back to the counter while they finished eating. He didn't ask for their story, but the way Claire lingered at the table, the way Lily leaned in toward the bowl as if it were the safest place in the world, he didn't need the details to understand the shape of their wounds. He lived in the quiet after loss. He knew what it looked like when someone found something that made the silence bearable. When Claire came up to pay, she hesitated. Tom, she said, I have to ask, how do you do it? Do what? Make food that tastes like someone cares. Tom looked up from the register. His voice was quiet but sure. I cook like someone might need it to feel whole again. Claire didn't answer right away. Her hand hovered over her purse. Finally, she said, You have no idea how much that means. I think maybe I do, Tom replied. As Claire and Lily left, the bell rang behind them, but Tom didn't watch them go this time. Instead, he turned to Max. Think we've got another regular? Max grinned. If she's helping stir the pot, you better show her the secret ingredient. Tom raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Max said it without hesitation. You. Tom laughed softly and ruffled his son's hair. Outside, the sky had cleared. The storm had moved on. But something else had stayed behind. Something warmer, more lasting. Not every customer who walked through the door changed your day. But sometimes they changed your life. And sometimes all it took was a bowl of soup. The third time they came in, there was no storm, no broken down car, no excuse, no sense of urgency. Just the soft jingle of the diner's bell and the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter. Light, hesitant, like someone relearning a language she used to speak fluently. Tom looked up from the grill and found Lily racing ahead of her mother, stuffed fox in one arm, bright pink sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. She made a beeline for her booth by the window, slid into the seat and set her toy beside her, like it too had ordered soup. Claire followed a few steps behind, this time in sneakers and a simple cream blouse. The heels were gone. So was the trench coat. The polished CEO veneer had faded into something more honest. Warmer, more tired maybe, but somehow more real. We were driving past, Claire said with a half smile, and someone insisted. Lily raised a hand with solemn authority. I need grilled cheese. Tom chuckled, setting down his spatula. Well, I happen to know a guy who makes a pretty decent one. Lily nodded with a sage expression. And soup. And the pudding, Claire added with amusement. She's been talking about your food like it's some kind of magic spell. Tom smiled but said nothing. He wasn't used to praise. He'd long since learned that quiet presence meant more than compliments ever could. As he returned to the kitchen, Max peeked in from behind the curtain separating the prep area. They're back again? Looks like it, Tom said. Max's grin widened. You should put her name on the booth. Tom gave him a look. Whose? Max shrugged. The little one, or the mom, or both. Not how booths work, kiddo. But Tom's mouth twitched at the corner. He plated the sandwich, just the right balance of cheddar and mozzarella, pressed until golden and crisp, and ladled the soup carefully, layering the herbs like he always did, like memory, not garnish. He added a small ramekin of banana pudding, not on the menu, and carried the tray out himself. Lily's eyes lit up when he placed it in front of her. This looks different, Tom nodded. Today I added a little rosemary. Thought you might like it. She took one spoonful, then another. She didn't speak, just kept eating, pausing only to wipe her mouth with the back of her hand. Claire leaned across the table, watching her daughter in quiet disbelief. I don't get it, she said softly to Tom. She refused an entire catered tasting last week. 4 chefs, 20 dishes, and here she is, eating soup like it's her birthday. Tom set down a glass of water. Sometimes it's not about the food, it's about how it's given. Claire looked at him. Do you always talk like that? Only when I'm trying to sound wise, he deadpanned. And she laughed. An unguarded laugh, free and surprising, even to her. It caught Tom off guard. He wasn't used to that sound anymore. Not in his own life, and certainly not coming from someone who looked like she had a calendar full of board meetings and platinum status with 5 airlines. You're not what I expected, Claire said after a moment. Tom raised an eyebrow. Expected from a guy who runs a diner? Claire hesitated. From a man who gave up a career like yours. He didn't flinch. He rarely did anymore. I didn't give it up, he said. I traded it for something else. Claire looked at him differently then, like she saw something deeper, beneath the apron and the flour-dusted counter. Something harder to define. I used to think sacrifice was giving up time for work, she said, but I think I had it backward. Tom tilted his head. What do you do, really? You never said. Claire glanced at Lily, then back at him. I run a company that develops wellness products, foods, supplements, lifestyle brands, clean eating, longevity, you name it. Tom smiled. That explains the puzzled look when you saw my butter-heavy grilled cheese. I've spent the last 5 years telling people to cut carbs, she admitted, and my daughter is sitting here licking pudding off a spoon. Tom glanced toward Lily, who had in fact tipped the ramekin to scrape the last of it. Well, he said, if you ask me, what you need sometimes isn't kale, it's comfort. Claire stared at him for a long moment. You know, she said softly, I haven't had a warm meal with her like this in months. Not one without screens, tantrums, or a phone call interrupting us. Tom said nothing. There was nothing to say. After they ate, Lily wandered over to Max, and the 2 children began assembling sugar packets into a small tower at the counter. Claire stood at the pass-through window, watching them. She likes him, she said. He's good with kids. Gets that from his mom. Claire glanced at him. Do you miss her? Every day, Tom replied. But not the way you'd think. It's not a hole anymore. It's more like a presence. Claire nodded. I've been divorced almost 2 years. It's not the same kind of loss, but the grief feels just as persistent, like a quiet roommate you never invited. Tom smiled gently. Yeah, that sounds about right. She studied him, and for a moment, something passed between them, wordless and weightless, but unmistakable. A thread beginning to form. Not romance, not yet, just a shared knowing. 2 people who'd lost something, learning how to sit with someone else in the quiet. When it was time to leave, Lily surprised them both by hugging Tom's arm. Can we come back tomorrow? Tom crouched to her level. Only if you help stir the soup next time. She beamed. Deal. Claire looked down, visibly moved. You've done more for her in 2 visits than therapy did in 6 months. Tom stood. I didn't do anything special, just listened. Claire met his gaze. Exactly. As they walked out, Claire paused at the door, one hand resting on the frame. Tom, he looked up. Thank you. For today. For this. You're welcome, he said simply, and then they were gone, the bell jingling behind them, but the warmth stayed. Tom turned back toward Max, who was now balancing 2 ketchup bottles like dumbbells. She likes you, Max said, smirking. Tom looked at the door a beat longer. I'm not sure it's me she likes. Max shrugged. Well, whatever it is, you should keep doing it. And Tom thought, maybe he would. The week passed with quiet rhythm. Tom opened the diner every morning at 7. He wiped the same counters, chopped the same onions, stirred the same pot of soup, chicken with herbs on Mondays and Thursdays, vegetable beef stew on Fridays. He and Max had built a life in the pattern of repetition, where comfort came not from novelty but from the way things stayed the same. And then came the 5th visit. Claire and Lily entered like they belonged, no hesitation, no glancing around to see if they were welcome. Lily marched straight to the kitchen pass-through and called, Do I get to stir today? Tom peeked out from behind a stack of plates. Apron's waiting? He tied a child-sized apron, an old dish towel with holes really, around her waist and handed her a wooden spoon. Claire, standing a few feet behind, leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching the scene unfold with a mix of wonder and something quieter. Something that looked a little like grief, but warmer now, softer. "Stir gently," Tom said, guiding Lily's hands, "just like you're tucking someone in." Lily giggled. "You tuck soup in?" "Every good chef does," Tom replied solemnly, and she giggled harder. Claire shook her head. "You've got a way with her." Tom shrugged. "Kids are like soup. If you listen close, they'll tell you what they need." Claire didn't say anything, but her gaze lingered on him longer than usual. Tom felt it, not in an awkward way, but like the first warmth of sunlight on skin that hadn't felt it in years. Later, while Lily played cards with Max in the corner booth, Claire sat at the counter, sipping tea from a chip mug. The rain had returned outside, this time gentle and forgiving, tapping lightly on the window panes like a lullaby. "You know what's strange?" Claire said, breaking the silence. Tom looked up from slicing bread. "What's that?" "I run a company that designs meal plans, creates organic food lines, lectures on nutrition, and yet nothing I've ever made or sold has fed my daughter like your soup." Tom finished cutting and set the knife down. "Maybe because I'm not trying to fix her. Just feed her." Claire was quiet. She traced the rim of the mug with one finger, thoughtful. "You ever feel like the more capable you become in life, the less useful you are to the people who matter most?" Tom leaned on the counter. "Every day." She looked up, surprised by the honesty. "Really?" He nodded. "I know how to poach the perfect egg, design a 5-course meal, pair wine with citrus notes. But when my wife was dying, all she wanted was toast and broth, and half the time I still got that wrong." Claire blinked, her throat tightening. "Tom, I don't need sympathy," he said gently. "I just mean, what we know isn't always what people need." Claire stared at him, and something opened in her face, a truth she hadn't spoken aloud yet. "I didn't want to be a single mother," she said softly. "I didn't want to raise a daughter who's scared of food, scared of touch, scared of the world. But I had a business to run. Investors, shareholders. I told myself she'd understand someday." Tom didn't interrupt. "She had a nanny. 3, actually. Rotated shifts, private school, private therapists. I tried to build her the most secure life possible, but she didn't want security. She wanted—" Claire paused, voice breaking. "She wanted someone who noticed the way she stirred her soup." Tom didn't speak right away. He just handed her a cloth napkin. No judgment, no platitudes. "Kids don't need much," he said finally. "Just someone who shows up, even when it's messy." Claire smiled through her tears, blinking them back with a soft laugh. "Is that your parenting advice? From a man who's winging it daily?" "Yeah." She looked toward the booth, where Lily had fallen asleep with her head on Max's shoulder. The 2 children sat like puzzle pieces, different shapes but somehow fitting. "I don't think she's been that calm in years," Claire whispered. "She feels safe," Tom said. Claire looked back at him. "Is that what you do here? Make people feel safe?" Tom thought about it. "I don't know. I think I just let them be hungry and then feed them without making them explain why." That silenced her. Outside, the rain kept falling, but the inside of the diner felt untouched, wrapped in some old warmth, like flannel sheets in candlelight. The kind of safety that can't be bought or scheduled. Tom poured another mug of tea, pushed it toward her. "You ever think about staying?" he asked. Claire raised an eyebrow. "In town?" He shrugged. "Just for a while. Let things slow down." "I don't slow down," she said automatically. "I build. I scale. I expand." "But your daughter," he said gently, "she seems to like shrinking into quiet." Claire looked down into her tea, her jaw tightening with the truth of it. "I'm not sure who I am without all of it," she admitted. "The job, the noise, the momentum." Tom didn't answer. He just picked up a slice of bread and started buttering it slowly. And maybe that was the answer. They sat for a while like that, 2 people not fixing each other, not naming anything, just letting the air settle between them like flour on a countertop. Eventually, Claire checked her watch. "I should go." "She can sleep a little longer," Tom offered. "No," Claire said. "If we stay longer, I might not want to leave. Tom smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing. Claire looked at him, really looked, like she was taking inventory, not of what he had, but of who he was. And then she stood, gathered Lily in her arms and whispered, "We'll be back." He didn't doubt it. Some strangers arrive because they're lost, but others return because they found something they didn't know they were missing. And for Claire and Lily, Tom's little diner wasn't just a stop on the way anymore. It was the first place in a long, long time that felt like home. The wind was sharp that morning, snapping at the awning of the diner like it had a grudge. The trees lining the quiet road out front were nearly bare, branches clawing at a sky the color of pewter. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and slow-roasted tomatoes. Tom stood behind the counter with his sleeves rolled up, hands dusted in flour, working dough for tomorrow's pot pies. His movements were steady, practiced, not rushed, not slow, just deliberate, the way people move when they've learned that some things in life deserve more than speed. Claire and Lily had become regulars now. Every few days they came. No more excuses, no broken cars, just a child with a growing appetite and a mother with quiet questions in her eyes. That morning, they came earlier than usual. Claire pushed open the door, holding it for Lily, who wore a knitted scarf that trailed behind her like a comet's tail. She ran toward the back booth with Max already waiting, and without prompting, picked up a deck of worn cards and began dealing. Claire hesitated at the threshold. Tom caught it, the flicker of conflict in her expression, the weight of two lives trying to exist at once. He nodded toward the stool at the counter. "Coffee?" She smiled, grateful. "Please." He poured a mug, set it in front of her, and wiped his hands on a dish towel before leaning against the counter across from her. "Rough morning?" he asked. Claire stared into the steam rising from her cup. "Investor meeting in 3 hours, 3 cities in 2 days, and a daughter who now refuses to eat unless it's food served on mismatched plates in a place with a squeaky ceiling fan." Tom smiled. "She's got taste," Claire laughed, but it faded quickly. "Tom, how do you do it?" "Do what?" "This. Be here. Be still. You're the only person I've met who isn't chasing something." Tom was quiet for a beat. He looked out the window where a few golden leaves danced along the sidewalk, then back to Claire. "I chased something once," he said, "and then I stopped, because I learned what mattered doesn't usually run away from you. It just waits for you to slow down." Claire sipped her coffee. "You've been through something, haven't you?" He nodded. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet acknowledgement, like saying yes to the rain. "My wife's name was Elena," he said. "We met at culinary school. She wasn't a chef. She worked in admissions. I used to leave cookies on her desk every Friday until she finally agreed to go out with me." Claire smiled gently. "Persistent." "Relentless," Tom said with a fond chuckle. "We got married young. Too young, probably. But it worked. We were broke and stupid and happy." He paused. "Then 3 years in, she got sick. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. By the time we found it, it had already spread." Claire's face softened, her hands going still around the mug. "I dropped out of school the next day," Tom continued, "sold everything that wasn't nailed down. Moved back to her hometown, this town. Took any work I could find to pay for what insurance didn't cover. Cooked for her every day. Sat beside her during every treatment. Claire reached across the counter and gently touched his hand. "I'm so sorry." He didn't pull away. "She passed 9 years ago. Max was just a baby. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor after the funeral, holding a bottle of formula in one hand and one of her scarves in the other, wondering how the hell you raise a child when the only person who made you believe you could is gone." Claire's eyes shimmered. "I opened this place the year after," Tom said. "Not because I wanted to run a restaurant, but because I needed somewhere to put the grief. Somewhere it could feed someone instead of eating me alive." He looked at her then, his gaze level but unguarded. "That's the real reason Lily eats here." Claire's voice cracked. "Because you understand. Because I don't try to fix what I don't understand," he said. "I just sit with it, stir the soup, wait for hunger to come back." There was silence. Not the awkward kind, but the sacred kind, where two people recognize a familiar ache in the other. Claire drew a breath. I thought I had to be strong all the time, had to keep moving, growing, expanding, that if I slowed down, it would all fall apart. Tom nodded. It's a common lie. Success is proof you didn't break. She looked toward Lily, who had now collapsed into giggles as Max tried to stack jelly packets into a tower. I think she was breaking while I was too busy proving I wasn't. Tom's voice was soft. It's not too late. Claire turned back to him. And you? You've built this life so quietly. No ambition to do more? I used to think ambition meant rising, Tom said. Now I think it just means showing up where you're needed most. Claire sat with that. Let it seep in like broth into bread. I've spent a lot of years eating beautiful food that tasted like nothing, she murmured. And here I am, in a roadside diner, feeling more fed than I've ever been. Tom smiled. It's not the food. It's how you're being seen. Just then, Lily skipped over to the counter. Can I help stir again next time? Tom looked down at her, playful. Only if you bring that pink scarf again. I think it's lucky. Lily grinned. Deal. Claire stood, her fingers brushing Tom's hand again, just briefly. Thank you, she said. For what? For showing up. And with that, she led Lily out into the cold, scarf trailing like a ribbon behind them. Tom watched them go, hands still warm where hers had touched. Some losses strip you bare, but others, if you let them, hollow out just enough space for someone new to step in. And for Tom, that space was no longer empty. It was beginning to feel like something was returning, something like life. By the time November crept in, the leaves had turned brittle gold and copper. They crunched underfoot like forgotten promises. The air held a bite to it now, sharp enough to wake the bones in the early morning, soft enough to feel like home by noon. Inside Tom's diner, things were shifting too. The booths, once mostly filled by quiet truckers and retired locals, now welcomed something new. Laughter. Laughter from a little girl who used to shrink from the world. The kind of laughter that starts small and unsure, then rolls like a wave once it realizes it's safe to come ashore. Lily was changing. She still had her stuffed fox and her oversized scarf, but her eyes were brighter. She no longer hovered behind her mother at the door. She walked in like she belonged, like her body remembered what safety felt like. That morning, she was already seated beside Max when Tom brought out their breakfast. Cinnamon toast with scrambled eggs, and a special hot chocolate with whipped cream that had taken him 5 minutes to perfect. Max offered her a napkin crown he'd folded from paper towels, and Lily beamed like royalty. Claire sat at the counter, watching with cautious joy. Her heels were long gone, replaced by scuffed ankle boots. She sipped her coffee with both hands and said softly to Tom, "She slept through the night last night. First time in, I don't know how long." Tom looked at her, not with surprise but quiet affirmation. Kids know when they're not being watched, when they're being seen. Claire smiled faintly, her eyes not leaving her daughter. It's like she trusts the world again, or at least this corner of it. Tom refilled her mug. Sometimes one corner is all you need. Claire turned to him, more serious now. I've been reading a lot about trauma, about sensory triggers, about how children build trust with the body before they do with the mind, but none of it said anything about grilled cheese and soup. Tom leaned on the counter. Maybe the books didn't have a childhood like hers. Claire let out a breath. You're not just feeding her, Tom. You're restoring something. He didn't reply, but the look he gave her said he understood exactly what she meant. Behind them, Lily waved a piece of toast in the air like a wand. Mr. Tom, can we cook something new today? Tom turned, eyebrows raised. Something new, huh? What do you have in mind? She looked thoughtful. Something warm and sweet and smells like Sunday. Tom grinned. That sounds suspiciously like bread pudding. Lily clapped. Yes, that. Claire's head tilted. You know bread pudding? Lily nodded. I remember it. I think I used to like it. Before. Before. The word hung in the air like dust caught in light. Claire reached out, brushing Lily's bangs from her forehead. Then let's bring it back. In the kitchen, Tom let Lily break the eggs. Max measured sugar. Claire stood off to the side, watching them, all of them, with a reverence usually reserved for stained glass and soft hymns. You ever think about doing this full-time? She asked. Tom glanced over. Baking? No, Claire said. Healing. Tom gave a half smile. It's not something you plan on. It's just what happens when you don't run away. Claire met his eyes, and for the first time, there was no pretense in hers. No shield of efficiency or business speak. Just a woman who had watched her child unravel and didn't know how to thread her back together until now. Sometimes I wonder if I was too late, she confessed. Tom paused, then wiped his hands on a towel. It's never too late to show up. She looked down. But I left her behind for so long. No, he said gently. You were surviving, and now you're living. That matters. She blinked fast. I don't know how to forgive myself. Then don't, Tom said. Just keep showing up. Let her show you how. When the bread pudding came out of the oven, the diner filled with the scent of cinnamon, vanilla, and toasted sugar. Lily peeked into the pan and declared it looked like a golden cloud. Max rolled his eyes, but Tom caught the little smile he tried to hide. They all sat down at the corner booth. An unspoken ritual now. 1 plate, 4 spoons. Lily took the first bite, then another, then looked at her mom and said, It tastes like the blanket you used to wrap me in. The blue one. Claire froze. Tom saw her eyes widen slightly, and then he watched her take a slow breath, grounding herself in the moment. I remember that blanket, Claire whispered. You always smelled like cinnamon when you held me, Lily added. Claire reached across the table and gently took her daughter's hand. I didn't think you remembered. I forgot for a long time, Lily said, but I think it was hiding, not gone. Tom watched the two of them, his hands folded in his lap, his heart both breaking and mending at once. He'd seen food bring back memories before, but this wasn't nostalgia. This was healing in real time. Later, after Lily and Max went outside to build leaf forts, Claire stayed behind. The late morning sun lit her hair like a halo, and her fingers nervously traced the edge of her empty plate. I think this place is changing me, she admitted. Tom tilted his head. That a good thing? It terrifies me, she said honestly. But yes. She looked around the diner. Its scuffed booths, mismatched chairs, crooked picture frames. I built a life where everything had to be perfect. And now, I'm sitting in a diner that smells like soup and cinnamon, and I feel like I can finally exhale. Tom offered a soft chuckle. We don't do perfect here, just warm. Claire's voice lowered. Warm is what we needed all along. There was a silence then, rich and full. Not a pause, an arrival, and in that silence Claire looked up at Tom with something new in her eyes. Something that wasn't just gratitude or admiration, it was presence. And it was growing. It had been nearly a month since Claire and Lily first walked into Tom's diner. The town had begun its quiet descent into winter. Mornings arrived shrouded in mist, and the scent of wood smoke clung to jackets and hair. Tom had swapped out the summer herbs in his garden boxes for evergreens, and inside the diner, cinnamon and nutmeg had claimed the air like familiar guests. That Thursday morning, Claire came in alone. The bell above the door jingled, and Tom looked up from behind the counter. For a moment, he thought something might be wrong. Lily never missed a visit now, but the softness in Claire's expression eased his worry. She's at a play date, she said as she slid onto the stool. With Max. They've somehow convinced the librarian to let them build a blanket fort behind the reference section. Tom raised an eyebrow. I assume bribery was involved. Claire laughed. Apple muffins, I think. Your recipe. Smart kids. He poured her coffee without asking. The quiet between them was comfortable now, like the hush in a kitchen where the work has been done well and the heat is just right. Claire stirred her coffee slowly. It's strange, she said, how a month can feel like a lifetime. Tom glanced over. Good strange. She looked at him. The kind that makes you wonder if you've been sleeping through the rest of your life. That stayed in the air for a while. Then she added more carefully, there's something about this place, about you, that feels like it remembers me, even when I forget myself. Tom didn't respond with words. Instead, he stepped into the back kitchen and opened the pantry, pulling out a small box from the top shelf, worn, faded, wrapped in an old ribbon. Inside, nestled between scraps of handwritten recipes and smudged photos, was a note. folded in half, creased down the middle. Only make this when your heart insists. It was Elena's handwriting. He stared at it for a long moment before setting it beside him and gathering the ingredients. Ripe bananas, softened butter, brown sugar, nutmeg, vanilla. Pudding, but not the usual kind. Banana pudding with vanilla wafer crust and whipped cream folded into fresh custard. Elena's favorite, the dish he made once a year, on their anniversary, and not since the year she died. He hadn't made it for anyone else, until now. He worked slowly, measuring each step with a reverence not for precision, but for memory. His hands moved like muscle remembered love before the mind could speak it. Claire stayed at the counter, watching the way he moved. There was something unspoken in the air, like a song humming just beneath the noise of everyday life. She knew this was different. He didn't speak while he worked. He didn't explain what he was making. But when he set the small bowl in front of her, there was a care to it that made her breath catch. The way he placed the spoon beside it, as if inviting, not offering, as if this, somehow, was not just food. Claire looked down. A single vanilla wafer sat atop the pudding like a memory. She took one bite and stilled. She didn't speak at first, just let the taste fill her. Soft, warm, comforting in a way that had nothing to do with flavor. Her eyes met his. "I don't know what this is," she said softly, "but it feels like someone wrapped my heart in a blanket and told it it's okay to come home." Tom leaned against the counter, his hands quietly resting. "It's a dish I only make for someone I love." Claire blinked. "Then why?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She sat back, tears rising without force, not from sadness, but from the strange, unfamiliar sensation of being received. Not as a CEO, not as a struggling mother, not as a woman trying to hold herself together, just as herself. "I didn't know food could feel like this," she whispered. "It can," Tom said, "if it's made by hands that remember what being held feels like." She looked at him then, really looked, and in his quiet, worn face she saw not only kindness, but presence, that rare and sacred gift of someone who doesn't try to solve you, but simply stays. Outside, snow had started to fall, thin flakes drifting lazily like they had nowhere urgent to be. Claire finished the last spoonful and set her spoon down like a prayer. "I've spent so long building something I could be proud of," she said, "and in one bowl of pudding I realize maybe what I wanted all along wasn't pride, it was peace." Tom offered her a napkin. She took it, laughed through her tears. "You know what Lily said the other day?" she continued. "She said this diner smells like when I used to sing to her. She said she didn't even remember I sang, but now she does." Tom nodded. "Memories hide in the strangest places." Claire stood slowly. "So do beginnings." She took a step closer to him, hesitation flickering across her face. Then she reached out, gently resting her hand over his. "I don't want to be another guest who leaves when the weather clears," she said. Tom's voice was steady. "Then don't." Claire let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "It's not simple." "I'm not asking for simple," he said. "Just honest." There was a moment. Then the diner door opened and Lily burst in, snowflakes clinging to her scarf, Max right behind her. "Mom! Mr. Tom! You should see the snow fort!" Claire didn't pull away from Tom's hand. She just turned, smiled at her daughter and said, "Show me." And she did. As they stepped outside, Tom lingered at the window, watching them run through the soft white, their laughter rising into the cold morning. He looked down at the counter, where the empty pudding dish still sat, spoon resting in its bowl like a completed sentence. He hadn't made that dish in 7 years, and somehow, today it had spoken a language he'd forgotten he still knew. The diner was quiet that morning. It was the kind of stillness Tom usually welcomed. The hush before the first pot of coffee had brewed, before the skillet hissed its daily song. He liked that hour, where the world seemed to breathe slower, and his memories were gentler. But today the quiet felt different, because yesterday he had made Elena's pudding, and he hadn't made it for her. The thoughts still lingered like perfume in a room long after someone has gone. It didn't feel like betrayal. Elena would never have called it that. But it did feel like crossing into something new, something real, something he hadn't expected to want again. Claire. She hadn't come by yet. Neither had Lily. But their absence didn't worry him. He'd begun to understand their rhythms. Some days they arrived at breakfast, other days after school. Each visit wasn't a promise, it was a gift. And that morning, Tom found himself hoping for the gift. He was wiping down the counter when the door opened, and in walked Ben Harris, a local mechanic and a chronic overtalker, cradling a newspaper beneath one arm and 2 donuts in the other. "Morning, Tom," Ben called. "You won't believe who's been eating at your place." Tom poured him coffee, amused. "You?" Ben laughed. "Besides me." "No, I'm talking real VIP. Page 6, brother." He unrolled the newspaper with dramatic flair and slapped it down on the counter. Tom glanced at it absently until he saw the photo. Claire, smiling, confident, dressed in a tailored navy suit with her hair in a sleek twist, standing on stage in front of a screen that read, "Claire Maddox, CEO, Verena Global Foods, reimagining how the world nourishes its children." The breath caught in Tom's chest like a hook. He blinked once, twice. Ben kept talking, oblivious. "Apparently she's worth a fortune. Some kind of startup turned wellness empire. You wouldn't think someone like that'd be hiding out here, huh?" Tom didn't answer. "Claire Maddox." Of course. The name was familiar now. The product lines, the glossy packaging he'd seen in supermarkets. Max's school even handed out Verena-branded snack bars last year during orientation. He hadn't made the connection. Because she'd never said her last name. Because she'd never mentioned the company. Because she'd sat at his counter, stirred coffee with quiet hands, and cried over banana pudding like someone whose heart wasn't made of headlines. He felt foolish, not because she was someone important, but because she hadn't told him. Because now every quiet moment, the shared silences, the gentle smiles, the warmth that had crept in so carefully, it all shimmered with uncertainty. Was she just escaping? Was he just a layover in her glittering, curated life? Ben patted the counter, oblivious. "Anyway, I gotta run. Just thought you'd want to know who you've been feeding." When the door jingled shut behind him, the diner fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. Claire showed up an hour later. She was wearing jeans and a wool coat, her hair loose, snow in her lashes. She looked like herself, the version Tom had come to know. She smiled when she saw him. But Tom didn't smile back. Her expression shifted. "Something wrong?" He gestured quietly to the newspaper still open on the counter. Claire's smile faded. She stepped forward, lifted the page gently, and stared at her own image. When she looked back up, there was no defensiveness in her eyes, just sadness, maybe even shame. "I was going to tell you," she said. Tom's voice was low. "But you didn't." Claire nodded. "I didn't know how. And the longer I waited, the more I didn't want to break what was real." Tom leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You thought telling the truth would break it." "I thought being who I am would change the way you looked at me," she said softly. Tom didn't respond right away. His mind was still sorting it out. The woman who ran food empires. The woman who stirred soup beside his son. The woman who cried when her daughter remembered the smell of her arms. Both were true. And yet something in him resisted the whole of it. "You're not just some executive," he said. "You're one of the most powerful food voices in the country. You speak at conferences. You build empires." Claire looked down. "And none of that helped my daughter eat dinner." Her voice cracked slightly. "I know I look like the woman who has everything figured out," she said, "but I'm not. I built something big so I could avoid the small, the things that scared me, like being a mother without a roadmap, like sitting still long enough to feel lonely, like," she hesitated, "letting someone see me when I'm not impressive." Tom was silent. Claire stepped closer. "I didn't come here to lie, Tom. I came here because my car broke down. But I stayed because, for the first time in years, someone looked at me and didn't see a brand." Tom stared at her, his voice quiet but edged. "You should have told me." "I know," she whispered. And then, as if on cue, Lily burst through the door, cheeks pink from the cold. Max following behind with a book bag slung over one shoulder. "Mom! We found the snow owl again!" Claire turned, her face softening instantly. She reached for Lily's hand, brushing a bit of snow from her hair. Tom watched them, watched how easily the girl folded into her mother's side. How different that was from their first visit. He exhaled slowly. He couldn't deny the truth. Claire hadn't come here to manipulate or deceive. She'd come to escape a life too loud to hear her own heartbeat, and somehow in this tiny diner, she'd found it again. He walked over, crouched beside Lily, and said gently, "You still gonna help me stir soup tomorrow?" Lily grinned. "Of course! I'm gonna be your sous chef forever." Tom glanced up at Claire. She met his eyes, and this time there was no hiding, no walls, no pretense, only truth. And sometimes, Tom thought, truth doesn't break things. It sets them free. The next morning dawned bright and silent, a hush blanketing the streets as if the snow had asked the town to slow down just a little more. Outside the diner, a fine dusting of white clung to the window panes. The world looked softer. Inside, Tom stirred soup in silence. The kitchen, usually filled with quiet music or Max's chatter, felt heavier today. Not empty, just expectant, like it was holding its breath. The newspaper from yesterday sat crumpled in the bin. The name Claire Maddox no longer carried shock, but it still echoed. Not because of what it meant out there, in boardrooms or on magazine covers, but because of what it almost disrupted in here, in this small world he had rebuilt, carefully, quietly. The bell above the door jingled. This time Tom didn't look up immediately, but the voice that followed made him pause. "I know you're probably still mad," Claire said gently, "but I brought a peace offering." He turned, brow raised. She held up a baking tray covered in foil. "It's banana bread," she said, stepping in and brushing snow from her coat. "My first attempt, possibly dangerous, but heartfelt." Tom gave her a slow smile. "You baked?" "I Googled, and I prayed." She set the tray on the counter, unwrapped it, and held out a slice. Tom took a bite, paused. "Not bad," he admitted. "A little dry." She groaned. "I was afraid of that." "But warm," he added. "And sincere." Claire smiled. "Like me?" He met her eyes. "Maybe a little softer in the middle." They stood quietly for a moment, the usual tension between them gone. What remained was something more honest, like the conversation that follows a storm when the house is still standing, and you realize maybe you are too. "I'm sorry," she said again. "Not for who I am, but for thinking I had to hide it. You've never asked for anything but the truth, and I want to be someone who can give that." Tom folded the towel in his hands. "I wasn't angry," he said. "I was startled. I've spent years trying to build something simple, honest. And when someone walks in with a world as loud as yours, it's easy to think they'll leave before the coffee even cools." Claire stepped closer. "I'm still here. I see that, and I'm not leaving." His eyes searched hers, quiet, steady. "Why not?" She took a breath, not rushed, not performative, just steady from the place inside her that had fought so long to protect itself. "Because," she said, "my daughter only eats when the food is made by you. I only sleep when I know she's had a day filled with peace instead of tension. And when I see you in this kitchen, listening without judgment, cooking without ego, something inside me stops bracing for the next demand." Tom didn't speak. He didn't need to. So Claire kept going. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from knowing she was about to say something she meant with her whole heart. "I don't want a private chef," she said, "or a driver, or another nutritionist, or someone with polished shoes who nods at the right times." She stepped around the counter now, into the space where he cooked, where he lived. "I want someone who stirs soup slowly," she whispered, "and remembers what people said when they thought no one was listening. I want someone who makes pudding for a little girl because she smiled for the first time in weeks. I want someone who shows up, who stays." Tom watched her. The air between them hummed. Claire reached into her coat pocket, pulled something out. Not a box, not a ring, but a folded napkin. She unfolded it and held it out. Written in neat, careful handwriting was a recipe. "Claire's banana bread, second attempt. Add more butter, less fear." Tom took it, smiled. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. Then she said it. "I don't have a ring," Claire murmured, "but I'm standing here in your kitchen, asking you to consider this. Not just being in my life, but being part of it. For real. For Lily. For me. I want to build something with you. Something messy and quiet and real. Not built on wealth, just built on presence. The silence that followed was thick with meaning. The kitchen felt smaller, warmer. Tom folded the napkin carefully, tucked it into his apron pocket, and said simply, "Okay." Claire blinked. "Okay? I want that too," he said. "Not just to cook for you, to stand beside you, stirring the pot, showing up, day after day." Her eyes brimmed. "Even without the ring?" He stepped closer. "I've never needed one. Just a recipe worth making." And then slowly he reached out, not to shake her hand or pull her close, but simply to rest his palm against hers, fingers interlacing like they'd been doing it forever. In that moment, no one said, "I love you." No violins played, no speeches followed, just two people standing in a kitchen that had seen sorrow and joy in equal measure. Just two people saying yes without ever needing the word. Behind them, the soup simmered gently. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and in the quiet warmth of that morning, something beautiful began. Not with diamonds, but with dough. It was a Sunday, the kind where the sky stayed a little brighter, even in the cold. The sidewalks glittered with last night's frost, and every breath came out in soft white clouds, like the town itself was exhaling. Inside the diner, the windows steamed with warmth, and the scent of cinnamon and roasted squash hung in the air like memory. Max sat cross-legged in the corner booth, reading a comic book, while Lily sat beside him, braiding the fringe on her scarf with intense focus. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. The comfort between them had grown wordless. They understood each other. Max knew what it felt like to lose someone you loved, to watch your parent carry more weight than anyone should, and to wonder if laughter would ever sound the same again. And Lily, she knew what it meant to go unheard for so long, her needs drowned beneath the noise of adult schedules and quiet heartbreak. In each other, they had found a strange kind of peace. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady, like a shared heartbeat. Tom was behind the counter, finishing the morning's prep. Claire stood beside him, holding a dish towel and trying very hard not to burn the toast. "Okay," she said, flipping the slice with exaggerated care. "That's the third one I haven't ruined. I think that officially makes me employable." Tom chuckled. "We don't pay well here." Claire smiled, brushing her shoulder against his. "Lucky I'm not here for the paycheck." Tom looked at her then, not with surprise, but with a kind of reverence. Each day she stayed, the silence in his life changed shape. What once had been absence now felt like room for something better, something present. "I like this version of us," Claire said quietly. "It's not fast, not loud, just enough." Tom nodded. "That's all I've ever wanted. Just enough. Not more. Not perfect." Outside, the snow had melted just enough for the kids to run. Tom glanced through the window to see Max and Lily bundled up, throwing small snowballs at a tree stump they dubbed the Dragon. He watched them for a long time, then said, "You know, she didn't talk like that before." Claire followed his gaze. "Lily," he nodded. "There's light in her now, like she trusts something again." Claire exhaled slowly. "She told me last night that she wants to learn how to cook. She said food makes her feel like she has a place." Tom's eyes softened. "She does have a place." Claire looked at him. "So do you." They fell into silence, one that felt like two arms wrapped around everything broken. Later that afternoon, after the last table had cleared and the kettle had gone quiet, Max climbed onto the counter and announced with great seriousness, "We need to have a family meeting." Tom raised an eyebrow. "That's so?" Max nodded, his voice mock official. "Lily and I have discussed it thoroughly. There are matters to address." Claire tried not to laugh. "Do I need to bring a notepad?" Lily sat beside Max, arms crossed, mirroring his exaggerated sternness. "First order of business," Max began. "Who is in charge of dessert decisions on Sunday?" Tom played along. "I thought that was my domain." Lily shook her head. "Unfair advantage. You're the grown-up." Claire leaned in. "What if we rotate? Everyone gets a Sunday, except maybe the cat." Tom smirked. "We don't have a cat." "Exactly," Lily said. She never pulls her weight. They all laughed then. Deep, honest, healing laughter. It filled the diner like music. And then the laughter faded, and Max looked at Tom with a seriousness beyond his years. "Second order of business," he said. "Are we a family now?" The question hung in the air. Tom looked at Claire. Claire looked at Lily. Lily reached for Max's hand. "I hope so," she whispered. Tom swallowed hard. He remembered holding Max in his arms the night Elena died, whispering promises he didn't know how to keep. He remembered the long silence that followed, the years of figuring it out one meal, one bedtime story at a time. And now, this. A girl who reminded him that healing doesn't always come through time. Sometimes it walks through your front door on a stormy night and asks for soup. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think we are." Max's eyes shone. Lily grinned. Claire blinked fast, then reached across the counter and took Tom's hand. "No ring," she said softly, "but a lot of presents." Tom squeezed her fingers. "More than enough." That evening, they sat down together for dinner at the booth by the window. Not a special occasion, no celebration, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and soft rolls. And four people who had once lived as half shadows, now sitting in full light. Max passed the butter. Lily recited a joke that made no sense but had perfect timing. Claire and Tom exchanged a glance that didn't need words. Outside, the street lamp flickered on, and inside, in the warm hum of clinking forks and quiet laughter, a new kind of life had taken root. Not perfect, but real. And when the meal ended and the plates were cleared, Tom took the cloth napkin Claire had once handed him, the one with the banana bread recipe, and slipped it into a small wooden box by the register. He wrote a new note beneath it in his own uneven handwriting. Sometimes family isn't made, sometimes it's found, already waiting at the table. He closed the lid and turned toward the kitchen, where Claire and Lily stood side by side, washing dishes in sink. Two strangers who had once arrived on a stormy night and somehow become his future. 1 year later, the sign above the diner still squeaked in the wind. The same soft chime of the bell greeted each guest. The same checkered floor bore the weight of muddy boots and careful footsteps. The tables still wobbled slightly, and the ceiling fan still buzzed on humid days. The place hadn't changed much, but inside everything was different. There was a new rhythm now, one that didn't come from chaos, but from belonging, from knowing. It was a Saturday morning in early December, and snow drifted slowly outside like someone had shaken the whole town inside a globe. The warmth of the diner fogged the windows, and the scent of cinnamon rolls and fresh rosemary biscuits curled in the air like a promise. Tom stood behind the counter, wearing the same apron he always had, but with something new tucked into the front pocket. A small folded piece of paper that read, in slightly smudged ink, "Add more butter, less fear." Claire was beside him, reading off a short prep list in her careful, no-nonsense tone. "Mashed potatoes for the lunch rush," she said. 3 loaves of honey oat, and... Tom leaned over and kissed her temple. Claire smiled without missing a beat. "And someone just interrupted my flow." "Guilty," Tom said. She nudged him playfully. "I'm trying to take this seriously. You know, for the investor." Tom arched a brow. "You mean Mrs. Bernice who brings her Yorkie in a sweater and tips with homemade jam?" "She's still technically an investor." Tom laughed and went back to kneading dough. Behind them, the sounds of the world waking up filtered in, clinks of cutlery, the thud of boots at the door, someone humming along with the radio. Max and Lily were seated in the corner booth, a deck of cards between them and half-eaten pancakes in front of them. Lily wore an apron 2 sizes too big, with sous chef in training, stitched across the front in crooked letters. She wore it like armor. "Your turn," Max said, tapping the table. Lily narrowed her eyes, then laid down her card. "Boom," she said, triumphant. "That's 3 games in a row." Max groaned and slumped in his seat. "Remind me why I taught you this." "Because you love me," she said sweetly. Tom watched them from the counter and felt something settle inside his chest. A stillness that wasn't silence, but peace. A year ago, he was a man making soup for a small town. A man who had made peace with loss, but not with joy. A man who believed his best days had been wrapped inside memories he visited but never touched. And now? Now his kitchen held laughter. Now his table was full. Now his son was not just surviving, but thriving, beside a girl who had once been afraid of food and who now wrote future chef on her school folder in marker. Claire moved past him, setting out place settings for the regulars who would be arriving any minute. Her presence was no longer temporary. She no longer dressed like someone ready to leave. Her hair was often pulled back in a soft bun, her hands always busy with something real, measuring, stirring, holding. She hadn't left her job, not completely, but she had reimagined it. Less travel, fewer headlines, more afternoons in the kitchen, more mornings beside Lily, more evenings where no one checked their phone. She told her board she wanted to focus on impact, not expansion. They'd been skeptical, until the numbers came in from a new pilot program, Simple Starts, a line of small-town cafes partnering with local communities to bring nourishing meals to children and families who needed warmth more than trends. The test location? Tom's Diner. It wasn't rebranded, it wasn't remodeled, it didn't need to be. It just needed more chairs and more soup. That morning, as Tom ladled chicken stew into an extra-large pot, Claire leaned over and whispered, "Do you realize what day it is?" He frowned, thinking, "Saturday." She shook her head, smiling. 1 year, since the storm. Tom looked at her, really looked, not just at her face, but at the life wrapped around her now. At the girl who called him Chef Tom when she wanted something. At the way Claire's hand always found his in quiet moments. At the softness in her eyes where once there had been control. "A year," he said softly. Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. Old, worn, the same one he'd tucked into a drawer the day she gave it to him. She placed it on the counter beside him. "I never stopped writing new versions." Sawarnakunam. Tom unfolded it. Inside, written in the same neat script, "Recipe for home. 1 part laughter, 2 parts presence, 1 generous spoon of grace. Serve warm, refill often." He said nothing. He just reached across the counter, took her hand, and kissed it. At the front of the diner, the door opened. Mrs. Bernice entered with her Yorkie and a new sweater. Behind her came a group of regulars, shaking snow from their coats, stomping boots. Tom stepped out to greet them, apron still dusted with flour. "You're just in time," he said. "The stew's extra good today." One of the men chuckled. "That's because the cook finally got some help." Tom grinned. "Can't argue with that." The diner filled, slowly and steadily. Conversations floated through the air, forks clinked against ceramic, and laughter hummed beneath it all. Claire sat beside Lily, who was now explaining to a fascinated Mrs. Bernice how to properly fold whipped cream into custard without breaking its heart. Tom shook his head and smiled. This wasn't the life he thought he'd have. It wasn't the life he planned. It was better, because it wasn't built on ambition or titles or shiny things. It was built on presence, on showing up, on soup stirred slowly and hearts mended gently. And as he watched his son share his plate, and the girl he once fed find her voice, and the woman he never expected offer him a home, Tom knew without question, they were the richest people on earth. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Are you listening from a cozy small town, a big city, or somewhere in between? Leave us a comment and share a little piece of your world. We read everyone. And if you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. There are so many more heartfelt stories waiting for you here. Stories about love, hope, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen in everyday places. Thank you for spending this time with us. From our little corner of the world to yours, take care, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story.